The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine carefully placed the last piece of her grandmother's jewelry back into its velvet-lined box. Her fingers trembled slightly as she touched the delicate pearl necklace that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. Today was different from all the other days she had worn royal jewelry. Today, she would debut a collection that held pieces of her heart, her history, and her hopes for the future. Catherine had always understood the weight of tradition, but she never truly grasped how heavy it could feel until she married into the royal family. Every piece of jewelry she wore was scrutinized, analyzed, and discussed by millions of people around the world. The sapphire engagement ring that once belonged to Princess Diana sparked conversations about legacy and love. The Cambridge lover's knot tiara brought whispers of elegance and grace. But today, she wanted to share something more personal, something that spoke to who she was before the titles and the crowns. The idea had come to her during a quiet evening with William, as they sat in their private sitting room discussing their children's future. She watched as he carefully polished his father's watch, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about the importance of family heirlooms. That night, Catherine realized she wanted to create a similar legacy for Charlotte, something that would connect her daughter to the generations of strong women who came before her, both royal and common. Over the past 18 months, Catherine had been working secretly with a small team of trusted advisors and jewelers to curate a collection that told her story. It wasn't about the most expensive pieces or the most historically significant ones. Instead, it was about the jewelry that had shaped her journey from a middle-class girl in Berkshire to the future Queen of England. Each piece had been chosen for its emotional significance, and, today, the world would see them for the first time. The collection included her mother's modest wedding ring, which Carol Middleton had worn for over 30 years. It was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing compared to the magnificent pieces in the royal vault, but it represented something Catherine valued deeply, the kind of love that grows stronger with time. Next to it lay a pair of pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for her 18th birthday, accompanied by a handwritten note that Catherine still kept in her jewelry box. The note read, "For my dear Catherine, may these pearls remind you that even the smallest irritation can create something beautiful." As she prepared for the day's events, Catherine reflected on how each piece in her collection had found its way to her. There was the delicate bracelet she had bought herself with her first paycheck from her job at Jigsaw, a symbol of independence that she had treasured even after marrying into royalty. The charm bracelet that her university friends had given her as a graduation gift, each charm representing a shared memory from their time at St. Andrews. These pieces might not have the historical significance of the crown jewels, but they carried the weight of personal history. The decision to make the collection public hadn't been easy. Catherine knew that sharing these intimate pieces would invite scrutiny and, possibly, criticism. Some might question why she was drawing attention to her pre-royal life, while others might argue that personal jewelry had no place in official royal duties. But Catherine had learned over the years that authenticity resonated with people in ways that perfection never could. She wanted young women to see that it was possible to honor your past while embracing your future. William had been her strongest supporter throughout the process. He understood better than anyone the challenge of balancing personal identity with public duty. When Catherine first showed him the collection, his eyes had filled with tears as she explained the story behind each piece. "This is who you are," he had said, holding her grandmother's pearls up to the light. "This is the woman I fell in love with, and this is the mother our children need to see." The palace staff had been initially hesitant about the idea. Jewelry announcements were typically reserved for major state occasions or significant royal milestones. But Catherine's private secretary, a woman who had worked with the royal family for over 2 decades, had been won over when Catherine explained her vision. "Your Royal Highness," she had said, "in all my years of service, I've never seen a member of the royal family speak so passionately about connecting with the public on such a personal level." As Catherine's stylist arrived to help her prepare for the day, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that she hadn't experienced since her wedding day. Today's schedule included a visit to a local charity that supported women starting their own businesses, followed by an afternoon tea with young entrepreneurs. She had chosen these events specifically because she wanted to debut her collection in settings where the stories behind the pieces would resonate most deeply. The charity visit held special significance for Catherine because it reminded her of her own mother's journey. Carol Middleton had built a successful party planning business from nothing, working from the family kitchen table while raising 3 children. The struggles and sacrifices Catherine had witnessed growing up had shaped her understanding of determination and resilience. When she wore her mother's wedding ring today, she would be honoring not just her mother, but all the women who had built something meaningful with their own hands. Catherine's relationship with jewelry had evolved significantly since joining the royal family. In the beginning, she had felt overwhelmed by the magnificence of the pieces available to her. The weight of wearing jewelry that had been worn by queens and princesses for centuries was both an honor and a burden. She had spent hours learning the history behind each piece, understanding the significance of different stones and settings, and mastering the art of choosing the right jewelry for each occasion. But, over time, she had come to understand that jewelry was more than just decoration. It was a form of communication, a way to honor the past while making a statement about the present. When she wore Diana's sapphire and diamond engagement ring, she wasn't just wearing a beautiful piece of jewelry, she was carrying forward the memory of a beloved mother-in-law and showing the world that some legacies transcend death. When she chose pieces from the royal collection, she was acknowledging her role as a custodian of history, someone entrusted with preserving these treasures for future generations. The personal collection she was debuting today represented a different kind of communication. These pieces spoke to her journey, her values, and her hope that authenticity could coexist with tradition. She wanted young women to see that success didn't mean abandoning where you came from, but rather finding ways to honor your roots while growing into who you were meant to become. As her hair was styled and her makeup applied, Catherine found herself thinking about Charlotte and the legacy she wanted to leave for her daughter. The royal jewelry collection would always be available to Charlotte as a future member of the family, but Catherine wanted to give her something more personal. She imagined someday sitting with Charlotte, now just a young girl fascinated by sparkly things, and sharing the stories behind each piece in the collection. The morning preparations continued with the careful selection of which pieces from her personal collection to wear. Catherine had decided to start with the pearl earrings from her grandmother and her mother's wedding ring. The pearls caught the light beautifully and would photograph well for the official portraits that would be taken later. The wedding ring, worn on her right hand to distinguish it from her own wedding rings, would serve as a conversation starter about the importance of family legacy. Catherine's stylist had suggested pairing the jewelry with a simple navy dress that wouldn't compete with the pieces for attention. The goal was to let the jewelry tell its story without distraction. As Catherine looked at herself in the mirror, she saw not just the Duchess of Cambridge, but also the daughter, granddaughter, and friend who had been shaped by the love and support of the women who had given her these treasures. The car ride to the first event gave Catherine time to review her notes about the stories she wanted to share. She had practiced telling each story until it felt natural, but she knew that speaking from the heart about such personal matters would still be challenging. The stakes felt higher than usual because this wasn't just about performing royal duties, it was about sharing a piece of herself with the world. As they approached the charity headquarters, Catherine could see the crowd that had gathered outside. The usual mix of photographers, reporters, and royal watchers lined the street, but she noticed something different in their energy today. Word had begun to spread about the special significance of today's jewelry choices, and there was an air of anticipation that felt almost electric. Catherine took a deep breath as her protection officer opened the car door. Today would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her royal story, one where she could honor her past while embracing her future. As she stepped onto the pavement, the morning sun caught her grandmother's pearls, sending tiny rainbows of light dancing across her navy dress. It was a perfect metaphor for what she hoped to achieve, taking something simple and beautiful and letting it shine in a new way. The crowd's reaction was immediate and warm. As Catherine approached the charity's entrance, she could hear people commenting on the elegance of her jewelry choices and speculating about their significance. She smiled and waved, feeling more confident with each step. This was just the beginning of a day that would change how the world saw not just her jewelry collection, but her approach to royal duty and personal authenticity. The atmosphere inside the charity headquarters was electric as Catherine moved through the reception area, greeting volunteers and staff members who had worked tirelessly to support women entrepreneurs in their community. The founder of the charity, Margaret Reynolds, a woman in her 70s who had built 3 successful businesses throughout her lifetime, approached Catherine with tears in her eyes. Your Royal Highness, Margaret said, her voice trembling with emotion, when I heard about the jewelry you're wearing today and the stories behind each piece, it reminded me of my own mother's wedding ring that I still wear every day. Thank you for showing the world that our personal treasures matter just as much as any crown jewel. Catherine felt her own eyes moisten as she embraced Margaret. This was exactly the connection she had hoped to create. As they walked through the facility, Margaret explained how the charity had grown from a small support group meeting in her living room to an organization that had helped over 2,000 women launch their own businesses. The parallels to Catherine's own mother's journey weren't lost on either of them. In the main conference room, Catherine met with 12 women who were at various stages of building their enterprises. Sarah, a single mother who had started an organic baby food company from her kitchen, immediately noticed the simple elegance of Catherine's pearl earrings. They're beautiful, she said, but there's something so approachable about them. They don't make you feel like you could never achieve that level of elegance yourself. This observation struck Catherine deeply. She had always been conscious of how her appearance might affect others, but she had never considered how her jewelry choices could either inspire or intimidate. As she sat down to hear each woman's story, she began to share the significance of her own pieces. When she told them about her grandmother's pearls and the note about small irritations creating something beautiful, the room fell silent. That's exactly what building a business feels like, said Lisa, who had started a sustainable clothing line after losing her corporate job. Every rejection, every setback, every small frustration eventually becomes part of something bigger and more beautiful than you originally imagined. The other women nodded in agreement, and Catherine realized she had found the perfect metaphor for resilience and growth. As the morning progressed, Catherine found herself in deeper conversations than she had experienced in many of her previous royal engagements. The jewelry seemed to serve as a bridge, making her more relatable and approachable. When she spoke about her mother's journey from working at British Airways to building a £1 million business, the women in the room saw their own struggles and aspirations reflected in her words. During a break in the formal presentations, Catherine was approached by Emma, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. Emma had been quiet throughout the morning, but she finally found the courage to speak. Your Royal Highness, I started my jewelry business because my grandmother left me a small collection of vintage pieces when she died. I was afraid people would think I wasn't sophisticated enough to understand fine jewelry, but seeing you wear your family pieces with such pride makes me feel like my grandmother's jewelry has real value too. Catherine spent the next 20 minutes with Emma, discussing not just the emotional value of inherited jewelry, but also the business aspects of Emma's venture. She learned that Emma had been struggling to find the confidence to market her pieces to higher-end clientele, despite having exceptional taste and craftsmanship skills. By the time their conversation ended, Emma had tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of gratitude and renewed determination. The official photographer captured moments throughout the morning that would later be described as some of the most genuine and emotionally resonant images ever taken during a royal engagement. In one particularly powerful shot, Catherine was seated next to Sarah, the baby food entrepreneur, examining a simple silver bracelet that Sarah had made herself. Catherine's grandmother's pearls caught the light as she leaned in, creating an image that perfectly captured the connection between tradition and innovation. As the charity visit concluded, Catherine was presented with a gift that she hadn't expected. Margaret had worked with the women entrepreneurs to create a small charm bracelet, with each woman contributing a charm that represented their business journey. There was a tiny silver spoon from Sarah's baby food company, a miniature sewing machine from Lisa's clothing line, and a small gemstone from Emma's jewelry business. But the most meaningful charm was a simple pearl, contributed by Margaret herself, with an inscription that read, "From one generation of strong women to another." Catherine was visibly moved as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist, adding it to the day's jewelry collection. "This will become one of my most treasured pieces," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Every time I wear it, I'll think of each of you and the courage it takes to build something meaningful from nothing." The journey to the afternoon's venue gave Catherine time to process the morning's events. She had expected the personal jewelry collection to resonate with people, but she hadn't anticipated how deeply it would affect her own understanding of her role. The stylist traveling with her noted how the new charm bracelet seemed to complete Catherine's look, adding a contemporary element that made the traditional pieces feel more current and relevant. The afternoon tea with young entrepreneurs was being held at a historic London hotel that had been restored by a group of women investors. The venue itself told a story of preservation and innovation, making it the perfect setting for Catherine to debut the next pieces in her collection. For the afternoon event, she had chosen to add her university friendship bracelet and the delicate bracelet she had bought with her first paycheck. As Catherine entered the hotel's main dining room, the reaction from the assembled guests was immediate. Word about the morning's jewelry revelations had already begun spreading through social media, and many of the attendees had read about the significance of her choices. The room buzzed with excitement as people tried to catch glimpses of the pieces that had been generating so much positive attention. The afternoon's format was more relaxed than the morning's structured presentations. Catherine moved from table to table, joining different conversations and sharing meals with small groups of entrepreneurs. At each stop, she found natural opportunities to discuss her jewelry choices and the stories behind them. The university friendship bracelet sparked particular interest among the younger attendees, many of whom were recent graduates struggling to balance their educational backgrounds with their entrepreneurial ambitions. "It's remarkable that you still wear something from your university days," commented James, a recent Cambridge graduate who had started a technology company. "It makes me think that success doesn't have to mean leaving your past behind completely." Catherine smiled and shared the story of how her university friends had each contributed a charm that represented a shared memory from their time at St. Andrews. The bracelet she had bought with her first paycheck generated equally meaningful conversations. Catherine explained how she had saved for weeks to afford the piece, working at Jigsaw while trying to figure out her post-university direction. "I had no idea where my life was heading," she admitted to a table of young women who were facing similar uncertainties. "But I knew I wanted something beautiful to remind me that I could take care of myself and make my own choices." This revelation sparked a passionate discussion about financial independence and the importance of maintaining personal identity even within committed relationships. Several of the women shared their own stories of meaningful purchases they had made with their first paychecks, creating a sense of shared experience that transcended social and economic differences. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine noticed how the combination of formal royal protocol and personal storytelling was creating a unique atmosphere. The traditional elements of the royal engagement remained in place, but the addition of intimate jewelry stories had transformed the event into something more like a gathering of friends sharing meaningful memories. One of the most touching moments came when Catherine was introduced to Rebecca, a young woman who had recently lost her mother to cancer. Rebecca had inherited her mother's modest jewelry collection and was struggling with whether to wear the pieces or preserve them unworn. "I'm afraid if I wear them, something might happen to them," Rebecca confided. "But if I don't wear them, it feels like I'm hiding her memory." Catherine listened carefully before sharing her own philosophy about inherited jewelry. "I think our loved ones would want their jewelry to continue being part of life, not hidden away in boxes," she said gently. "Every time you wear your mother's pieces, you're honoring her memory and carrying her love with you into your daily experiences." Rebecca's tears flowed freely as she thanked Catherine for the perspective that would change how she approached her inheritance. The afternoon's photography session captured images that would later be featured on magazine covers around the world. In one particularly striking shot, Catherine was photographed from behind as she examined the hotel's restored stained glass windows. The natural light illuminated her jewelry in a way that made each piece seem to glow, while the historic backdrop emphasized the timeless nature of personal treasures passed down through generations. As the formal part of the afternoon concluded, Catherine found herself in an impromptu conversation with the hotel's general manager, who revealed that the building's restoration had been funded entirely by women investors who wanted to preserve a piece of London's history. The manager showed Catherine a small display case near the lobby that contained jewelry and personal items that had been discovered during the renovation, pieces that told the stories of the women who had visited the hotel throughout its long history. "Your jewelry collection reminds me of these pieces," the manager said, gesturing toward the display case. "They might not be the most expensive or historically significant items, but they carry the real stories of real women's lives." Catherine was fascinated by the parallels and spent several minutes examining the discovered items, noting how each piece reflected the style and values of its era. The drive back to the palace gave Catherine time to reflect on how profoundly the day had affected both her and everyone she had encountered. The jewelry collection had accomplished exactly what she had hoped. it had created genuine connections and meaningful conversations about heritage, independence, and the importance of honoring one's personal history. But, more than that, it had shown her a new way to approach her royal duties, one that balanced tradition with authenticity in ways she hadn't previously considered possible. As evening approached, Catherine began preparing for the day's final event, a private dinner with a small group of jewelry designers and historians. This would be her opportunity to share the complete story behind her collection and discuss her vision for how personal jewelry could play a larger role in royal engagement with the public. She felt confident and excited about the conversations to come, knowing that the day's success had proven that people were hungry for the kind of authentic connection her collection represented.